Imagine ordering a perfectly cooked steak and being told it was delivered straight from space. Sounds impossible, right? But here's the question nobody asks. What if a raw steak slipped from the International Space Station and fell toward Earth? Would it arrive as the world's most expensive barbecue or something far stranger? At first, the answer seems obvious. Falling objects heat up, meteors burn, spacecraft glow red hot. So a steak dropped from orbit should cook itself on the way down. Except that assumption hides a surprising secret. Before the steak can even leave the station, it has to break dozens of rules. Astronauts don't carry raw meat into space. Every meal is carefully tested, approved, and prepared months before launch. Sneaking a fresh ribeye aboard the ISS would already be a mission nightmare. But let's say someone somehow did it. One accidental slip during a spacewalk. One floating steak drifting away into the darkness. And that's when things get interesting. The International Space Station circles Earth at roughly 400 kilometers above the surface. That's far higher than commercial airplanes, higher than weather balloons, higher than almost everything humans regularly send into the sky. So what happens if gravity takes over? Most people imagine the steak immediately plummeting toward Earth like a dropped rock. But here's the strange part. That's not what happens at all. Scientists know that speed changes everything. As objects fall faster and faster, the air in front of them gets compressed. Compression creates heat. Lots of it. Drop a steak from 70 kilometers up, and it actually breaks the sound barrier. Sounds impressive. Yet even after screaming through the atmosphere at supersonic speed, the steak would still be mostly raw. And that's not even the craziest part. Push the starting point higher. Much higher. At 100 kilometers above Earth, the steak races through the sky at nearly twice the speed of sound. Now the surface begins to crisp. Tiny sections start cooking. Finally, progress. Or so it seems. Because while the outside heats up, the inside remains stubbornly cold. Why? Because Earth's upper atmosphere is brutally freezing. The steak is being heated and chilled at the same time. And this is where it gets weird. Raise the drop point to 250 kilometers. Now the meat tears through the atmosphere at 6 times the speed of sound. The outside develops a beautiful seared crust. The inside, still raw, still red, still nowhere near edible. What happens next changes everything. Go even higher and temperatures near the shockwave explode into the thousands of degrees. The outer layer doesn't simply cook anymore. It burns. It chars. It begins turning into carbon. Suddenly the steak isn't becoming a gourmet meal. It's becoming space debris. And here's the twist nobody expects. Even dropping it from the International Space Station wouldn't fully cook it. After all that heat, after all that speed, after all that chaos, you'd end up with a burned black shell wrapped around an uncooked center. The exact opposite of the perfect steak. But the real shock isn't about cooking. The real shock is about where the steak actually goes. Because in reality, it doesn't fall straight down at all. And once orbital physics enters the story, the entire experiment flips upside down. Everything you've heard so far assumes one huge simplification. That the steak falls directly toward Earth. Reality is far stranger. The moment the steak leaves the International Space Station, it inherits the station's incredible orbital speed. Around 28,000 kilometers per hour. That's faster than a rifle bullet. Faster than most people can even imagine. Instead of dropping straight down, the steak enters orbit. Suddenly gravity isn't pulling it into Earth. It's trapping it around Earth. But here's the terrifying part. Roughly 90 minutes later, that same steak could return to nearly the exact place it started, potentially flying back toward the ISS itself. Imagine that. A runaway piece of meat racing through space at orbital velocity. One collision could release enormous energy. A harmless dinner has suddenly become a threat. And that's when the entire story changes from a funny thought experiment into a lesson about how dangerous space really is. Every lost object matters. Every mistake matters. Even something as ridiculous as a steak. By now we've learned something unexpected. Space can't cook the perfect steak. It can burn it, freeze it, launch it into orbit, or even send it hurtling back toward the astronauts who dropped it. But it cannot give you the meal you imagined at the beginning. Which leaves us with one final mystery. If something as simple as a steak behaves this strangely in orbit, what other everyday objects would become completely unrecognizable once they leave Earth? And what would happen if one of them came back?